Rogers TV. The opinions expressed in the following program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Welcome. Joining me now, we have Tracy Anselmo-Matthews. Thank you so much. She's from WindHorse Psychology. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to be talking about mental health, but we're going to be talking about something a little bit more specific. Can you tell us and can you describe what PTSD is?
Yeah, sure. So post-traumatic stress disorder is a disorder that occurs in reaction to a major trauma. So basically, anyone who undergoes a trauma, something a life-threatening, a life-threatening event, they'll often experience a lot of symptoms afterwards, things like nightmares and intrusive memories, being hypervigilant and jumpy and, all of, different symptoms, we'll all kind of experience these similar reactions. When it becomes post-traumatic stress disorder is when it persists for more than a month. So after a trauma where a person continues to really be affected by the memory of what occurred, and it affects, lots of different facets of life, right? So so there's avoidance of a lot of things. So they begin avoiding things that might remind them of the traumatic experience. There's this hyperarousal. So it's associated with things like being unable to sleep or having trouble concentrating, just being hyper alert and hyper aware, preoccupied with safety. It also can occur in, things like changes in the way a person thinks or changes in their emotions. So it could be sometimes a lot of irritability, possible anger outbursts, just looking at the world, looking at themselves in a different way than they did prior to the traumatic experience. And sometimes like emotional numbness, which is also kind of a form of avoidance, kind of a way of protecting themselves, right? So it's, sometimes difficulty just experiencing any kind of positive emotion at all, sometimes feeling very detached from people. So these are all symptoms that make up these constellation of symptoms will make up post-traumatic stress disorder. And no two people with post-traumatic stress disorder will have the exact same experience, right? But these are just some of the ways that that post-traumatic stress disorder can manifest.
Okay, well, now I've been speaking to different people throughout this process and doing these different interviews and speaking in the community. And I've talked to different types of frontline workers, both on the medical side, but also those frontline workers like the tradespeople, people that keep your fire alarm systems working and keep people who are electricians, people that have been keeping everything function for us while we've been home and dealing with different types of stresses. Is it, and when they're explaining what they're feeling, a lot of the times they're like, I can't even describe it. I'm nauseous. And I wake up at night. I'm an insomniac all of a sudden, all these types of things. So can this be considered a post-traumatic stress disorder that they're going through from dealing with the issues of COVID and being out there every day since day one?
Sorry, you cut off the last few minutes there, the last few.
So I'm just, yeah, absolutely. So I'm just, these types of symptoms that people are experiencing, can this be related to PTSD as it pertains to COVID-19 and being out there from day one and being exposed to so much more than those of us who are at home that are dealing with different types of stresses and anxieties?
Mm-hmm. So I think definitely it could be, it could be a traumatic experience, right? And it can create like this kind of traumatic reaction. Absolutely. Post-traumatic stress disorder. So there's specific criteria, for post-traumatic stress disorder, which is in the DSM-5. So as of now, the traumas that kind of qualify for diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder are more things that are kind of sudden, unexpected. And mostly medical issues don't actually, even though there's that threat of death or threat of serious complications, medical things don't often apply. So some medical experiences that would apply to post-traumatic stress disorder would be something like someone going into anaphylactic shock, because it's kind of very catastrophic and shocking and sudden, a hemorrhage or something, experiences like that. So I don't know if it would necessarily qualify as post-traumatic stress disorder, but definitely can be a very traumatic experience. And again, frontline workers, depending on who. So obviously someone in the medical field may be experiencing and seeing some things that could over time, create a post-traumatic stress issue. For those that are, like you mentioned, just kind of being out on the front lines, like tradesmen, cashiers in the grocery store, all these type of kind of frontline workers that have had to continue working while a lot of us have been able to stay at home. Definitely that does create a lot of stress, not only of the virus itself, possibly getting sick, possibly bringing the virus home to loved ones, right? There's all these concerns that definitely is very stressful. And then on top of it, a lot of the ways that we're used to kind of coping with stress have been taken away from us in this during this pandemic, right? Because, a lot of times we do suggest to people, you need to get out and socialize and, go to the movies, do things that you enjoy to de-stress. And, with having to self-isolate and, physical distancing, it's been difficult for a lot of people, even some clubs that they might, or sports or, lots of our coping strategies have been kind of not as accessible at this time, right? So I think definitely, the social isolation, all of these things can be traumatic and can, result in post-traumatic stress-like symptoms, right? And so, like you mentioned, that people sometimes don't know how to explain it, and it's, heart racing or trouble sleeping, right? And that's anxiety, that's stress, right? And a lot of times, these things manifest in physical ways, right? So trouble breathing, shakiness, heart racing, difficulty sleeping, just irritability, and all these different things are signs of stress, and we may not recognize them as such necessarily, but yeah.
Absolutely. And I feel that, if you are having these symptoms and these feelings and you may not know what to do with them or where they're coming from or where they originated from, and then you come home and you may be dealing with complete isolation, or you may be dealing with the stresses of having your family home and having, spouses or partners working from home. And so there seems like there's no getaway other than going out for a lovely walk or doing these types of things. So I think for a lot of people, they may not realize some of the things they're going through. Is that an accurate description?
Yeah. This is all very kind of still all very new, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, everyone talks about the new normal, right? So everyone's still adjusting to that, right?
Absolutely. So when we're talking about family members that are coming home and feeling like this, or if people are coming home and feeling like, what should family members be looking for those people? Because a lot of the times, being at home and dealing with your own stresses and anxieties, teaching your children, now that's over, but doing all of these things has created your own world of stress and anxiety as a family unit. But I think oftentimes we don't think about those people that are out there working, unless we're talking about frontline workers where we know they're putting in extra hours and they're doing all this. But the everyday person that normally is out there working and coming home and maybe experiencing these symptoms, what should families look for before, at what point should families say, we need to we need to do something about this?
I think just noticing changes in behavior, and I guess opening up a dialogue is great. You know, being willing to kind of listen and to check in on people. And I think, you know, that has been one good thing that's come out of this pandemic. I think people are, you know, talking more about mental health and checking in on each other and seeing how they're doing. And, you know, like, how are you coping with things? And, you know, it's often conversations that we didn't really have before that now, you know, we have been having, I think, a little bit more, which is great. But I think, yeah, just checking in on people, seeing how they're doing, and, you know, encouraging that dialogue. And, you know, because we're all experiencing stress. I feel it's affected everyone in different ways, right? So those who are off working every day through this, you know, there might be a lot of different emotions that come into play, you know, maybe even some anger, some resentment at having to go out to work, where a lot of people are working from home, you know, there's a lot of different things going on. So just being, you know, willing to, when you see a change, a little more irritability, maybe people withdraw, you know, just kind of a change in behavior, just to open up that dialogue and see if you can see kind of what's going on, and if you can lend an ear and be supportive.
Absolutely. And I think that if you are somebody who's feeling like this, and this is kind of like struck a light bulb in the back of your head going, maybe this is what is happening to me, because you are out there. If you know people, and you, Tracy, you correct me if I'm wrong, if you know people that are experiencing the same things or within the same industry, because one gentleman that I spoke to said, you know what, I didn't know what to do with myself. I'm completely stressed out. I ran into somebody who is in a similar industry, and they said they were feeling the same way. And that was a sense of relief for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, knowing that you're not alone, which is why it really is important to reach out to people, right? Even if it's, you know, video calls or telephone calls, or just, you know, talking to coworkers. There is some, you know, there is definitely, you know, you definitely do get some sense of relief from knowing that, you know, you're not alone in this, right? And that other people are experiencing the same thing, and that the stress and the anxiety, you know, is, you know, it's okay. It's normal, you know, it's to be expected. You know, yeah. So sharing with other people, I think that sense of connection really can be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of us who know people that may be out there working and living on their own, this is the time to reach out. This has been months now. So we want to make everyone in our circle is doing okay, because no one knows, you know, a lot of us don't know what it's like to come home after a day of working out, and the kind of the pandemic that we're in now, and hearing the different news and all of these just anxieties coming up, and then they come home and they're alone and they don't have someone to talk to. So I do encourage everybody out there, reach out to people in your circle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Very important.
So we have about a minute left, and I just want to talk about different, with regards to these symptoms. When should people look for help?
I think people should look for help just when they notice that it's starting to affect their functioning in any way, right? If you're finding that it's, you know, that you're not, you know, you're arguing a lot with your family, you're not getting along with people, you're having difficulty getting work done, or just high levels of distress, right? I mean, if there's no, you know, I always encourage people to seek some help, right? You know, you don't have to wait for things to be dire before you go out and speak to someone, right? So I think if you're kind of questioning whether or not you may want to go out and get some help, it's probably a good idea to do so.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
I'm Marianne Kennedy. And I'm Dawn Rockall. And we can't wait for you to join us on some of our new adventures on Season 2 of Ghosts of Dufferin County and Beyond, right here on Rogers TV.
Tracy, let's get back into what we were talking about. We've been talking about some of the symptoms and the signs that people are dealing with anxiety for those people who are out there working and have been out there working every day. But some of these things do apply to people who are at home as well. So let's talk about ways that we can deal with these types of feelings, whether we're at home, we're at a job site, maybe we don't have the opportunity to call someone to speak to them about how we're feeling.
Mm-hmm. So I think some help. I'll just mention some ways that I think are helpful in this pandemic to kind of cope with the added stress. I think one important thing is always to kind of focus on what is under your control, right? So with this situation, it's often just thinking about what you can do, what control you do have, what you can do to keep yourself safe, what you can do to keep your family safe, right? So making sure that you're, aware, keeping up with the, with the best, medical advice at this point of how to keep yourself safe, and making sure that you're doing all of those things and just focusing on the control that you do have. And when you start, and then once that is done, it's okay to try a little distraction a little bit, right? You don't need to be listening to the news 24 hours a day, and always have to, you know what I mean? It's important to keep aware and keep updated and everything, but, not kind of, keeping the news on all the time and checking the latest numbers, getting a little bit of distance from that sometimes. As I said, keeping in touch with people, talking to other people is important. And just engaging in, hobbies that you still can do, picking up new hobbies, so just kind of knowing that the anxiety is normal, that we're all, that you're not alone, right? That sense of connection, that we're all kind of going through these things, focusing on what you can control. And, and then once you're doing everything that you can do to keep yourself safe, and to prepare for things, then to allow yourself to try to let it go a little bit. And if you can't, then distraction can be a little bit helpful. Also mindfulness can help. There's a lot of great apps out there, even just, that focus on mindfulness, that can teach breathing techniques, meditation techniques that can really help with stress, right? So I would research some apps, maybe even on mindfulness or relaxation meditation. That can be really helpful in managing stress. So
and I think
some suggestions.
I think, those are great suggestions. And I think it's really important to the mindfulness, the breathing techniques, the meditation. These are things that you can do when you're out on a job site. If you're feeling that anxiety build up and you're feeling that stress build up, then maybe that's time for you to take a break, to go on a lunch break, to go do, go for a quick walk around the block, whatever you're able to do at that
absolutely. time. And just focus on your, absolutely. So you just stop, focus on your breathing for just a few deep breaths can make such a change, right? So just take a few deep breaths, slow down the mind. Mindfulness, I can't get too much into it. It's a big topic, but mindfulness basically is about being aware of the present moment. So if you can even just take yourself to the present moment, sometimes it'll be helpful to just kind of look around, right? And one simple exercise is just look at 5 things, look at something. What do you see, right? Just being aware of what's around you. What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you feel on your skin, right? So just getting in touch with the present moment and what is happening right now can be really kind of grounding and helpful when the mind is just kind of racing. So take a few deep breaths, focus on the present moment, those things can be helpful. I think with, and I think even too, like just taking things one day at a time, with this pandemic, it can get discouraging when we start to think, too far ahead and how much longer will this last? And there's a lot of unknowns, right? So I think sometimes, in the moment when feeling overwhelmed, it's helpful to focus on the present moment and to take it day by day.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit on a very valid point. And I've told my husband this too. Like all the boys in my house have been working since day one, and putting in extra hours and doing, and they're in the trades and the grocery industry, and that's some of my kids. But one of the things I've said is you hit it on the head, is maybe not being on social media and watching every newscast to find out what's happening. And I think that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially not doing that maybe right before you go to bed or right when you get up in the morning, because that
absolutely.
It sets the tone for how you sleep and how you wake up, and you really want to focus on something that's positive.
That's right. Yeah. Before bed, especially not helpful to be watched, not helpful. I know a lot of people, watch the 11 o'clock news and then go to bed, but it can interfere with sleep because it gets the mind going and the worries going. And same thing, waking up in the morning can kind of set the tone for the day. Again, definitely important to stay informed, but just if you're noticing that you're having a hard time sleeping at night, then maybe, try to get informed and to keep up on the news earlier in the day, right? Just kind of paying attention to things like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on the social media side of things, we are overwhelmed with stories, some partially true and some completely true. So if you are looking for a news source and you really want accurate facts, I request
stay away from social media, right?
You know what? Take a weekend away from being online, perhaps, or take a night away.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can, absolutely. Because that's right. I mean, it's everywhere, right? So even if you're not out there looking for it, if you're just on social media, it's kind of constantly in our faces, right? Yeah.
Always there. And sometimes you don't know what is true and what's not. And you can give yourself from anxiety. Spend some time with your family, take your dog for a walk. Spend some time with your family.
Absolutely. Spend some time outdoors. Luckily, the weather is kind of beautiful now, so we can actually spend a little bit more time outdoors, right? Even kind of socializing and being able to keep that physical distance, but, seeing people a little bit more and, yeah, exactly. So disconnecting a little bit from social media and from all of that, absolutely helpful. Maybe even just limiting how much you do that every day.
Absolutely. Having that time of gratefulness where you just sit back and think about the things that you are grateful for. We have no control over what's happening, and we're all anxious to find out, when is this going to be done? When is this going to change? When is the government going to allow more? When, are we going to go into a second wave? This is stress and anxiety that all of us feel. But when you've got that building up, there are some people that just kind of let it build. What happens if you're getting to that vital point where you should be doing something and you're not? How does that affect a person if you don't find the help that you need?
Well, I think if you don't go out and get the help you need, things either stay the same or sometimes they get worse, right? If someone is, really kind of stressed out, the problems will then escalate, right? If you're not doing well at work, things, and then things start going wrong at work, and now you have another problem on your hands, or you're coming home and you're always, irritable or not getting along with family, then that'll add more stress because there's family problems. So, I think, definitely getting help, nipping things in the bud. It's definitely absolutely important. Yeah, before things get too out of control and before it starts to affect your functioning too much. Definitely important to get that.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It can start to manifest in physical illness, right? Like if you let this build up too much, you'll start to see symptoms more, not just the stress and anxiety that you may be feeling, but can this manifest itself into different types of symptoms and illnesses that physically you would feel?
So I think definitely being under high levels of stress chronically, right? It kind of, it can, result in issues, kind of suppress the immune system, and what could leave you kind of more susceptible to things. In the long run. I think also, so generally, keeping stress-free is definitely, or not stress-free, which is impossible, absolutely, but trying to manage stress, right, is important for not just mental health, but also, your physical health. Absolutely.
And there's a lot of resources out there online, people that you can reach out to from the Canadian Mental Health Association and people like yourselves that can help work through these issues.
absolutely. And most psychologists, psychotherapists, are still working throughout this time. Many are working from home, and so you'd be doing video therapy as opposed to in-person treatment. But there definitely are options, so you don't have to wait until this is over to go out and look for someone to speak to.
Absolutely. And let's talk about that. So we are going to get to the other side of it. There is going to be a new normal. It's not going to go back to what it was before. But if we developed all of this stress and anxiety, and whether we're at home or at work or wherever it happens to be, when the pandemic and we get to this new normal, will these symptoms just go away, do you think? Or is this something still people will have to deal with after the fact?
Yeah, no, definitely. No, definitely things, it depends, right? I think, we talked about a post-traumatic stress disorder before, earlier on. And so it's post-traumatic stress disorder. So it's once the stressor is over, the issue is that the symptoms continue, right? So it's definitely, likely that for some situations the issues will kind of linger, especially in the case of something kind of like post-traumatic stress. There will be cases when things kind of return to a bit more normal, some things will improve, right? So as I mentioned, there'll be more access to those usual coping strategies that people usually depend on to manage stress, right? But no, I think definitely, things don't just automatically go away once the.
And I think people sometimes think that, right? Like, I think some people think that, oh, well, you know what? We no longer have to worry. Maybe there's a time where we don't have to wear a mask in Dufferin County everywhere we go, or you have that option, or it's safe enough, or there's a vaccine. So all of a sudden people think, well, oh my goodness, it should just go away. Like,
yeah. But there's always, for different, after there will be, lingering worries about, it coming back, or, what about the next virus, right? So it can result in people with, lingering kind of fears about this type of thing, right?
Yes, because there's nothing to say it's over. Like, it doesn't mean that things won't come back, or similar things will not happen again, because we were.
And then I think some people will be financially obviously affected by this, in a way that's not going to, end, automatically at a certain date, So yeah, even the consequences, economically or otherwise of this, won't, end on a clear date. There won't be a day where, okay, it's over, we can all go back to normal, right?
Yeah, there definitely isn't an end date. So I wanted just to ask you a question. So during all of this time, what are you doing other than helping people? What do you do to remain happy and joyful at this time?
Yeah, so I think one thing that you touched on, gratitude, which I think is great, right? So that's important, even when you are going through tough times, right? Just being grateful for, what is going right, what is helping you through these times, right? So that sense of gratitude, right? Being grateful. Spending, taking time, personal care, right? Just making sure to spend some time outdoors, connecting with people, just finding ways to take breaks from things and to do whatever it is that you can do to de-stress, engaging in kind of pleasurable activities. And
If you want to do anything in television, here's the best place to do it, because they're very hands-on. You see what goes on in the community that you might not normally see. They're people from our community, so they know and they have a heart for our community to step outside of our comfort zone and do more and learn more and take the opportunities, and then you can grow and use it. My name is Paul Bates, and I'm a volunteer at Rogers TV.
After a night out with your friends, not having a plan for a safe ride home can leave you in a bad spot. You could end up riding in a police car, an ambulance, or a hearse. These unplanned modes of transportation can be a costly choice and do not take you home. Your plan could include a designated driver, a taxi, or public transit. Drink responsibly, choose your ride, and have a plan for a safe ride home.
Visit arrivealive.org to find out more.
Joining me now, we have Tina Wannamaker. Tina, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us today.
Oh, no problem, Tina.
Wonderful. Well, you have a very, it's a unique story to many, many people, but it's not unique to yet a mass of people. So let's start talking about how COVID-19 has affected your life personally.
Well, it has kept me and two of my kids at home for 3 months. So that, like everybody else, that's a bit challenging at times. My eldest son has severe special needs and lives in long-term care. So we've had a challenging time because he would come and visit us regularly and we don't get to see him as much.
Right. So when this all started, when we were all told it's time to stay home, first I'll get you to tell us a little bit about Jacob.
Okay.
Some of the things that he's going through, and then how it affected you when this all first started.
Of course. So Jacob is 23 years old. He has autism, bipolar, and Prader-Willi syndrome, and has been living in long-term care for 2 years. For those 2 years, we would take him biweekly for 24-hour visits. We'd go and pick him up, and then they would pick him up at the home, and that was going really, really well. And then COVID came. When COVID hit, his home responded amazingly. They shut their doors. They did everything right. They have not had any issues within their home. And then the one problem is I can't see my son. So since March, I have not been able to hug him. I've not been able to hold him. I've not been able to have him here at the house with us and to have that kind of normal routine that we would have that he's so used to having in his life. We have been able to FaceTime. The staff there are truly amazing, and they have let us use their own personal devices, Jacob, to use their phones because he doesn't have any access to any technology like that just yet. And we FaceTime regularly, so I get to see him. Now, it's been a long time. And nearing, I'd say, the last 3 weeks, when I go to FaceTime him now, because he doesn't understand what's going on. You can't explain to Jacob. He's nonverbal, and he just doesn't understand that I'm not picking him up because of COVID. He doesn't really understand that. And what you could see on the calls was that he was mad at me, essentially, because I wasn't there to pick him up. And not understanding why I'm not there to pick him up like I had always done. And he would see my face pop up on the screen for FaceTime, and he would just put his head down, upset. And so we had to stop doing that. I did get a call from his home saying that they were opening up for visits. And this was before they put the measures in with the ministry. I was able to visit him. It was the socially distanced visit. It was on his birthday. As soon as they called, I cried for 2 hours straight because I didn't realize how much emotion I was holding in from actually not seeing him. I was putting on that brave face of no, I get to see him on the phone. And when they told me that, I just wept and wept and wept. And when I got to see him, it was good for him. He's been doing much better. His behaviors have decreased, but he's definitely, it's good for him. But it's difficult. It's difficult to visit with a mask on, and you can't touch or hug your son, and he's so far apart.
Yeah, that's completely understandable and so completely heartbreaking to hear it. So you were talking about Jacob's behaviors. So in this span of time without seeing you, can you talk a little bit about how that affected him and how he was behaving?
Yeah, well, it would be that his behaviors would be affected not just from not seeing me, it's also from not being able to go out in the community and access certain resources he was able to prior to COVID-19. he would have regular behaviors. It's why we chose to put Jacob into long-term care 2 years ago, because his behaviors can be very extreme and aggressive. And he's doing very well in his home, and they're wonderful with him, but he still continues to have behaviors, on a daily or every couple of day basis. I will get behavior reports. What I did notice was over COVID, when that began, is the behaviors began to increase. And they increased a lot, and there was a lot of more extreme behaviors. And it's to no fault. I mean, they get him outside on the front lawn and they do different things with him and dance with him and play with him, but it's not the same as being able to do all the trips and getting out and doing different activities that, I know we're all impacted, but you have to remember that this is an individual that doesn't understand what's going on and can't be told, okay, well, here's COVID-19. This is something that's going to affect you and your family, and you could get sick. He's not understanding any of that. To him, in his world, he's just completely being isolated, right? So.
Yeah, and that's completely understandable. And I think what a lot of people may or may not realize is that people who have different conditions like Prader-Willis syndrome, autism, all these different things, they are really focused on regular schedules. And I think that just that alone, as you mentioned, can definitely have an adverse effect. So now that you're able to see Jacob, how has the regulations for visiting changed? Is there specific things that you have to do each time that you go to visit?
Yeah, well, yeah. Shortly after that visit, I found out I was very lucky because the ministry had not put in their guidelines. And I mean, pretty much it was all the same. The home really set some really strong boundaries on that. They did say we had to socially distance and we had to wear masks and the visits could only be outside, which is aligned with what the ministry put out there. But the ministry also put out that I have to be tested for COVID every 2 weeks. So I did have to cancel. I did have a visit plan on the weekend and wasn't able to get my test until yesterday. So I just had my first COVID test yesterday, and we'll be doing it bi-weekly so that I can drive up and have an outdoor visit with him.
And how has this affected the whole family? Like you said, you have 3 children. So the other...
Yeah. It's difficult for them. I would say for me as an adult, it was on FaceTime, it was difficult at first, those little emotional moments when you're really getting cutesy or you just want to snuggle him and you're like, hey, I love you. And you're silly. It's hard to do that in front of other people and knowing everybody's watching. But as an adult, and a mom, I really don't care. I'll do that for Jacob. I'll do anything that makes him laugh. However, my other 2 kids are early 20s. So it's a little more difficult for them to be that. They feel exposed and to have their personal private visits with other people watching and in attendance. They just feel a little exposed and it's a little difficult on them. They just want to have Jacob come home so they could snuggle on the couch with him and take pictures on Snapchat and videos with him, and the things they really like to do that they don't feel comfortable doing with other people watching.
Yeah, and that is also completely understandable. I think it's a as we move forward, hopefully that when the visits continue to increase and we get past this to our new normal, people will definitely be able to get that sort of semblance of family. I can, my heart breaks just thinking about it as a mom, right? So,
yeah.
So at the beginning of this, you had a bit of a health scare with regards to COVID-19.
I did. And this was in the very beginning, pretty much when they were only doing testing for people that had been out of country or had been in close contact. I mean, the parameters were really, really strict at that point. I lost my sense of smell. I was sick for 4 weeks, couldn't breathe. My family basically pushed me, you need to go speak to the doctor and call Ontario Public Health. So I did. And based on their guidelines, they did actually recommend that I speak with public health. So I did. I spoke with a nurse, and then she said that it sounded as if I had COVID-19 and to speak with my doctor. And my doctor informed me at the time that there wasn't enough tests for people, that I shouldn't be wasting a test if I could actually speak on the phone still, and that I didn't sound sick enough to need a respirator, so not to go get tested. And yeah, no, I was off. I was very sick for 4 weeks. It was a little scary at times, but yeah, that's over with. I'm feeling better now. My lung capacity has not been the same, to be honest, since. But I mean, I feel fine now, so it's good. It's at the time to say that I actually had it. I don't feel like I actually have that right in a way to say it, just because I didn't have the test, which is funny, because if it was any other, flu or anything, we could say I had the flu, I had the cold, and I don't feel like I'm validated in saying that I had COVID-19 because I didn't get a test. But.
Well, I mean, the tests have definitely broadened, and still, if you are feeling any symptoms, we do encourage you to go to all of the testing centers and look it up online for your local public health unit, Public Health Ontario, anything like that. If you are feeling any of these symptoms, you are encouraged to definitely go out there and do that. So with all of this, oh my gosh, this is so overwhelming for everything in the few months, the 4 months that have passed. What are you doing outside of all of this to remain sane?
Well, I am someone who loves yoga and meditation and walks. So I take very long walks every single day with my dog. And he loves it. So when I'm not home, I don't know how he's going to manage. Yoga, meditation, exercise. I try to do a lot of the normal things. And let's remember, I did have a son with severe special needs. So it's almost as if I had prepared for this moment for a long time, because I was quite isolated for a lot of years with him at home. So.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about what Prader-Willi syndrome is?
Okay, so it is, I guess to simplify it's an organic brain disorder. So it's something that happens where it affects your hypothalamus and it's impaired. So somebody with Prader-Willi syndrome, for them, their hormones to tell them that they're full is never there. He's never satiated. He's hungry all the time. And it's different because it's a chromosomal deletion. There's a little piece missing off of his chromosome, and it depends on how much is missing. Most people with Prader-Willi syndrome have very mild delays. Jacob has a very large piece missing from his chromosome, so he is very severe. His speech is very delayed. He's a wonderful person. I'm talking about all the things that's going on with him with delayed this and that, but he is really a joy in my life. But the part of his brain that basically tells him that he's full is just, it's not working the way ours is. So, and his hormone regulation, which affects moods and height and growth and sexual maturity and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
And this was something that he developed right at birth. This is something that you just...
It's something that actually occurs during conception. And he was diagnosed very early. He was born premature, so he was in the hospital and he had a failure to thrive, which is the classic first stage of Prader-Willi syndrome. He had a failure to thrive, and we were very fortunate at the time that a doctor from Sick Kids happened to be in the neonatal unit where we were at. And he recognized what it was, because at the time there still isn't a lot of recognition, but back then there was virtually none. So he had recommended that he get tested, and he did, and he had it. And then years later, they finally gave him the diagnosis for autism, which was, we were really happy because it opened up a lot for him.
When you're online, Rogers TV on YouTube shares news and events from your community, like messages from local leaders, updates on the latest health news, local business presenting their new offerings, and how our local communities are working their way through these unprecedented times. Visit and subscribe to Rogers TV on YouTube for the latest local information.
September 20th, 2007.
January the 9th, 2003.
December 14th, 2013.
On August the 13th, 2009, Dr. Ian McGilvray and his team saved my life.
Too many people die every year waiting for an organ donation. Please, let's eliminate the wait list.
As an organ donor, you can save up to 8 lives and enhance the lives of 75 others. Life's a gift to life. You'll be glad you did.
Joining us now, we have Victoria Johanson from Snapd Dufferin-Caledon. Victoria, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So this has been a challenging time for all of us. And I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about how this is affecting your business, being as that Snapd has always been such a community partner and out there promoting events and that sort of thing. And now events have come to a halt for the most part. So can you talk about how that's affected you?
Well, pretty much it's changed our entire paradigm of how we run our business. As you know, Snapd Dufferin-Caledon was very, very event focused. We were out and about in the community to share what was going on, what has gone on, and kind of be like a retrospect of sort of like I always call it Facebook and print. This is what we did and this is what went on. And there was nothing. I mean, literally I came back the end of February from Florida, and within 2 weeks, the entire world shut down by the middle of March. I had a really good publication ready to go. As you know, we did a big spread on the wedding event planning industry. I thank God for that, really, because it did give us something really great to focus on. But also when the world changed, it still gave all of those people that were still Wedding Central focused something to be positive about, because, okay, we might be postponing it this year. Things may not be able to happen the way they always have, but that stuff still became relevant because they now had to think about what they were going to do for 2021. So everything from the event side just fell like crackers through the sieve. It was just, there was nothing. And we basically came up with, okay, well, what are we doing to get through this? And how can we get through this together? Where the world was kind of encouraging social distancing, we became that beacon of social connecting. And I think that's what kept us relevant through sort of the worst of it.
Absolutely. And things have been so fluid and changing all the time. And I mean, we're getting closer. The government has introduced phase 2 a few weeks ago. And as Dufferin County and Caledon progress, everything is starting to function. But I mean, the events themselves, community activities still are restricted at this point in time, including weddings, as we well know. So when it came to producing the paper and distribution of the paper, how did you have to change it for COVID-19?
Well, I mean, I focused on each paper at a time. I had to get through 1 month at a time. And as you said, everything was very fluid. So we also became a very good communicator. And the fact that we have augmented reality gave us that extra bit, because we could print an article or an advertisement or a communication piece. And then we could layer the video part of it behind it that could change as things changed. We could change that video, that augmented reality piece, as things progressed or as they changed or as information changed. The biggest part for us, though, was obviously our distribution model. Our distribution model is based on locations. We are a publication that you can go to almost any corner store, any location basically throughout Dufferin and pick up a copy. And it takes us 15 hours to deliver to all the distribution locations. Well, as you know, everything closed. I was scrambling, and I had some really good partners, like Tim Hortons was going to allow people to pick up through the drive-through. But then it just became a logistics nightmare. And then we also wanted to set an example of not being that encourager of people leaving their homes. I didn't want you to have to go out, and I didn't want to have to put my people in jeopardy by making them go out to these locations to try to get distribution. So with the help of our head office and a lot of many late night Zoom calls and meetings, we engaged the support of the County of Dufferin, and MPP Sylvia Jones stepped up to the plate and came to our support to give us some resources to be able to get their communication as well as all other communication out via Canada Post. That was a daunting task. If you've ever looked at a postal delivery, it makes no rhyme or reason to me because it's not what I do. But then we had to find that sweet spot of how much revenue we had and how much we could, basically use to not now only double my print distribution. I used to print about between 5,000 and 6,000 papers, and now I was doing between 11,000 and 12,000 papers. So not only did I incur the cost of increased production, but then now I'm going to mail them out.
And that is it is a daunting procedure. As speaking to somebody who has mailed out many things through Canada Post, the process alone can be somewhat overwhelming, not to mention the costs that are involved in it. So moving forward and getting us through, and we're going to have a look at what you think the silver lining is, or any of these things that you may continue to do once we reach the other side of the pandemic.
Well, one of the things, like I mentioned, is that Snapd became a social communicator and connector. And we started to focus on the positive small stories. And one of the things that rose from all of this were the incredible human beings that stepped up to look after those of us who could not. There were some, very wonderful stories of people just, delivering weekly or daily to seniors who were compromised and really couldn't leave their homes. I had, we had parents that were now, not only were they trying to work from home, but they're now also having to educate their own children. They were becoming homeschoolers. And the adoption and the evolution of so many people to doing so many phenomenal things was so inspiring. And then the silver lining is I don't want to lose contact with those kinds of stories. It's great to go to a parade and it's great to go to a fundraiser, but the core essence is that we are focused on people and those stories of the people. Like, I can't even tell you how many times I was brought to tears by just an incredible story, because I got the privilege to hear some of the really horrible hardships and closures of businesses and sadly, some relationship breakdowns because of being so in a sort of rough time. And to be able to have the good things helped counterbalance for me, because I'm a much pot, let's face it, I'm not tough enough for all of this that came my way. And I took it on, and I was very sensitive, and the positive stuff just kept me to the next day, to the next day, to the next day.
And I think that's one of the things that no matter who I've spoken to through these past months, we've always been able to find that silver lining, that one thing that makes this experience a little bit more positive. For some families, it's just becoming closer and being a part of it and connecting with people maybe you haven't connected with for a long time, and businesses are finding services that they hadn't really anticipated ever doing, but decided that they had to do in order to survive. And parts of those businesses will continue on. And that's why I always call it the silver lining to the pandemic. So we appreciate you sharing those stories, because there are so many stories of what a great community we are, and coming together to help others, and then finding those people that need these resources and getting them in the right direction, for sure. So moving forward, distribution, is that going to be changing for
actually for the July edition, which is coming out momentarily, I'm going back to my original model of location distribution. I mean, it was really quite complementary, because the people at Sobeys and the people at Freshco, which is two of my biggest locations, like at a Freshco in Orangeville, I go through 1,700 papers a month. And if I could get there more often, I probably would go through more, because many times I go and it's just, there's one or two copies left. One of the things, though, that people were bugging the cashiers, are you guys going to get any snaps in here? Are you going to get any snaps? We got ours mailed, but my grandson's in it and I want extra copies. So I ended up doing porch drop-offs. I would go, people would message me and I'd go to their porch. I did fill up a couple of outdoor boxes that if I couldn't get to somebody or they didn't want me to come to their home, on their leisure, they could go to the box at like Home Hardware in Orangeville or the No Frills in Shelburne, or, you know, so it was a little crazy, but we're going to try and get it back to normal as much as possible. I'm going back to I've ordered extra copies so that, again, I can do some porch drop-offs for people who aren't able to get out and about. But and one thing, too, is I'm thrilled to be able to re-employ my distribution team, because that was hard. I mean, I know that they kind of rely on the income, you know, that little extra income every month. And, you know, there was no work for them to do. So I like that. I like that I can go back and, you know, hire my team.
Well, that is definitely good news. And for those of you that are watching, by the time you see this edition, the July edition of Snapd will be out, and look for it in your local stores and where you normally pick it up.
All over too, back to Grand Valley, back to Caledon, wherever there's a location that will be open. And I'm going to put extra copies at the places that normally, if I left 25 copies before, now there will leave 50 or something like that, so that there won't be people running out, because not all locations, like I know McDonald's is opening up that you can go into the store now to order, but you still have to take out, or you can use the patio. Well, they have a rack that is always a very popular location to pick up the snaps, so those will be full to the rim.
Well, that's wonderful. So tell me, Victoria, how else can the community help you? We've got a couple minutes left. How can we help you?
Well, I mean, everybody's been phenomenal about sharing stories, but you know, I really do want those things that are helping you to thrive throughout this. We created a whole Thrive at Home feature program, and you can upload your photos. You don't have to rely on a photographer. It's super easy. You download the SnapTub, and then you just follow an event, and then that's where I can collect photos for the paper. I've had some really great experience where somebody submitted a photo of somebody that was doing something great, and they didn't know about it until they got the paper, and they were like, "How did you get that?" And somebody submitted it on their behalf, and it's a great feeling. It's a great feeling when somebody, you know, like we did puppies through a pandemic. You know, I don't normally comment on the birth of puppies, but those puppies and that family, and it was in the June edition, and it just lit up everybody's lives. It was so great to see these, you know, the story of these puppies. I followed it online. It was like Puppygate. Like, I had to see what my puppies were doing. No, I didn't get one. as much as I wanted one so badly, and a lot of people did get pets through this. I didn't. But also, if you are watching this, I'll give you a scoop that isn't out yet. This will be the world announcement that August is going to be back. We're going to bring back our pet feature contest. I'm just working with my sponsors now, and so last year I said I would never do it again, but I am going to do it again, because if I can survive Gratitude for Graduates, I can survive another pet contest. So that'll be fun, and everybody loves that, and that'll be great content, because when you look at a puppy or an animal, it just seems to melt you. So brings us all back to what's important, and something fun and soft and cuddly.
Yeah, and I think we all need that. There's a lot of mental stress for being at home. There's a lot of mental stress for all of those first line workers, the trade workers, all of those people that have been through this entire time. And you know what? Seeing some pictures of some adorable pets, you just can't stop from smiling and giving you that warm, happy, fuzzy feeling. So
yeah.
Absolutely. Victoria, I want to thank you so much for taking part of and taking time out to speak with us today and share your experiences and how COVID-19 has affected you. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
And so, This organ, which I regret I cannot name, because of the presence of these members of the weaker sex, who, although they are married, could not possibly endure...
Get them out.
Patience, Ginny. Patience.
Get them out!
Dr. McFarland!
Mrs. Trout.
There's no place for women in a medical school.
Yeah.
Get them out!
If you do not bring this classroom under